Chapter 3506. Hearing this, everyone was slightly surprised and couldn't help but look at each other. Du Fan asked, "Master, do you have other plans? Or do you want to stay here for a few more days? Immerse and I are going to take a look at the continent where the sovereign of Tongtian is." Fengjiu looked at them and said, "I don't plan to tell Immerse about this. If he asks, don't tell him either." Seeing this, everyone paused for a moment, then nodded and replied, "Yes. Master, when are you leaving?" Leng Hua asked. After Immerse is done, we'll go to the palace to say goodbye to his father and leave." Fengjiu said, "I'm going to let Song Ming and the others go to the sect in the upper world to cultivate. When the time comes, you can go with them." "Yes." Everyone replied. After listening to her instructions, they left first. Wanyan Shirsan came to the courtyard and said, "I heard you say you're leaving before I even came in. Looks like you really can't stay idle." Seeing that it was him, Fengjiu smiled. "This time, I have to thank you for bringing me such useful information. The facts have also proven that I was right to ask you to do this." "Aha, of course I'm definitely a reliable person." Wanyan Shirsan laughed loudly and sat down at the table. "I originally wanted to come and say goodbye to you. It looks like you'll be leaving before us." "You're leaving? Going back to the upper world?" Fengjiu asked. This time I came out to give you a gift on behalf of my family. Now that I've finished my task, I have to go back and report. Also, I haven't been back for a long time, so I have to go back and take a look." Wanyan Shirsan looked at her and said, "I heard from Qian Hua that she's also going back to the upper world. I reckon that Junju Shang will follow her." Hearing this, Fengjiu couldn't help but smile. "My sister and Junju Shang are like this now. I don't know when they'll be able to break this stalemate. However, I reckon that not long after the child is born, everything will be different. It's just that her reputation isn't very good if she has a child before getting married. I'll go back and persuade her. She'll be fine. After all, she has to give the child a complete family. Moreover, Junju Shang is indeed a good man. Hehe. Although his seniority is a bit high and he's a bit old, but it's just right that he's an old man and a young wife." The two chatted in the courtyard for a while. Until they left. 2 days later. When Emo Chen came to the residence, he didn't see Fengjiu and Shenyuan Mose. Just as he was about to ask Leng Hua, he saw him walking towards him. "Young Master Emo Chen." Leng Hua bowed to him and said, "We were just about to look for you." "Why are you looking for me?" Emo Chen asked. He glanced at him and asked, "Why aren't Ajio and the others in the residence? I haven't seen her for a few days. Where did she go?" "Master and the Yama Lord left 2 days ago. This is the letter that Master left for young Master Emo Chen," Leng Hua said. He took out the letter left by Fengjiu from his sleeve and handed it to him. Hearing this, Emo Chen frowned. He took the letter and opened it. The more he read, the more he frowned. Did they say where they were going? Chapter 3507. Emo Chen looked at him and said seriously, "Do you know that the Black Lotus Lord's Black Lotus is very powerful? Even Fengjiu can't resist it?" Leng Hua's eyes flashed, but he didn't say anything. Fengjiu can't resist it. Even if she and Shenyuan Mose work together, they don't have full confidence that they can defeat them. Especially when their enemy isn't just the Black Lotus Lord. If the Black Lotus Lord works together with the Sovereign of Sky Reaching and the Demon Lord, what do you think their chances of winning are? Emo Chen held the letter in his hand and looked deeply at Leng Hua. He said, "Why do you think I've been following her all this time? It's because they have a trial of life and death that has yet to be broken. No one knows when this trial of life and death will come true, or what the consequences will be. As for me, as the saint and the guardian of the Star of the Phoenix, I'm the only one who can help them once the trial of life and death comes." Emo Chen looked steadily at Leng Hua and asked, "Now, are you still going to tell me that you don't know where they went?" Hearing his words, Leng Hua sighed softly and said helplessly, "I know, but Mistress also told me not to tell you. Because Mistress doesn't want you to always be by her side and live for her. Mistress, she doesn't want to owe you." A dark light flashed across Emo Chen's eyes. He said, "She doesn't owe me anything. I'm just fulfilling my duty as the saint. Tell me, where did they go?" Leng Hua looked at him and finally said, "Master and the Yama Lord went to the mainland where the Sovereign of Sky Reaching is. She said that she wanted to go there and take a look. As for the specific location, Master didn't say. We don't know either." Even if he disobeyed his master's orders, he still told him where his master had gone, because what he had said before was exactly what he was worried about. Forgive him for his selfishness. He knew that his master was in danger, but there was nothing they could do to help his master. Therefore he hoped that Emochin could help his master. Even if he was punished by his master, he would have no regrets. He only hoped that his master and the Yama Lord would be safe and happy. Hearing this, Emochin gave him a deep look and nodded. I understand. After speaking, she turned around and left. After Emochin left, Lung Shuang walked over from not far away. She looked at Emochin's departing figure, then looked at her younger brother and asked, Did he ask you about your master's whereabouts? Yes, Lung Hua replied and smiled bitterly. Sister, I've told him. Lung Shuang paused for a moment and said, If you've told him, then so be it. Actually, I don't feel at ease with only the master and the Yama Lord leaving. Master will be punished when he comes back later. They were not people who were loyal to the death. They knew what was best for their master. Even if they disobeyed their master's orders, if it wasn't for the fact that their own strength was much weaker than Sovereign Tong Tian and the others, they would have followed them secretly just in case. Sister, I'll go tell Hui Lang and then get ready to leave. Lung Hua said and looked at his sister. Lung Shuang nodded and watched him leave. Then she turned and left as well. On the other side, Xianyuan Mose and Fengjiu, who had arrived at the Sovereign of Sky reaching through the portal, were resting by a stream in a small forest. Fengjiu looked at Xianyuan Mose and said, Take a rest first. I'll help you disguise yourself a little. Chapter 3508. After Fengjiu washed his face, he looked up and was stunned for a moment. When he saw the familiar bearded face, he couldn't help but burst out laughing. Uncle? Uncle? Xianyuan Mose's face darkened. He tugged at his beard and asked, Am I very old? Ah. Fengjiu couldn't help but laugh. Looking at his expression, he finally managed to hold back his laughter. Actually, you're not old. You're just right. Moreover, compared to a pretty boy, I prefer an uncle. When he heard this, Xianyuan Mose's expression softened. He said, I don't need to disguise myself. I'll just put on a beard to cover my face. You just have to change it a little. Your appearance. That he stared at her beautiful face and felt that she looked even more attractive after she got married. The expression in her eyes and eyebrows was especially seductive. It made him want to hide her and not let others see her beauty. Especially when he saw her come out, he relaxed a lot. Just like when he first met her, she laughed out loud. His heart couldn't help but move, and his eyes burned with passion. Fengjiu touched his face and asked, What's wrong with my appearance? As he spoke, he moved closer and closer. His eyes burned with passion. She couldn't help but smile and reach out her hands to push against his chest. She teased, Uncle, we're in the little forest. The look in your eyes makes me so scared. I'm not going to eat you. His voice was a little hoarse. Seeing her smile like a flower, he was in a good mood. Are you going to sleep here tonight? Or do you want to hurry up and find a place to stay? It's not my first time sleeping in the wild. I don't mind. You'll be with me anyway? Fengjiu smiled and said, All right, wait for me. I'll put on a simple disguise. When he heard that, Xianyuan Mose sat on a rock and watched her as she busied herself. After some thought, he said, Wait here for a moment. I'll go hunt some wild animals and bring them back. There's no need to trouble yourself. There's food in the space. Just make do. She pulled him and said, Put on a beard. Thus the two of them changed a little. They changed their clothes and restrained their aura and cultivation. They looked much more ordinary and inconspicuous, like an itinerant cultivator couple. This is really good, Fengjiu said with a smile. He tugged at his inconspicuous green robe and looked at the black robe on him. You look exactly the same as when I first met you. But compared to then, you're much more mature. Xianyuan Mose stroked the beard on his face and glanced at Fengjiu. I didn't think that you'd actually like this kind of thing. Ha ha, that's right, I like you. What? Fengjiu smiled happily and reached out to hold his hand. She jokingly said, The uncle from back then is now my husband. I still remember that I accidentally kissed you at that time, and you directly fainted. Xianyuan Mose's ears turned red. He coughed and said, Why are you bringing that up? I've already forgotten. Chapter 3509. On the mountain road, for carriages were stopped halfway. Dozens of black-clothed men were fighting with the guards accompanying the carriages. The carriages seemed to be filled with women and children, and there seemed to be elders as well. Children's voices could be faintly heard from the carriages. As the carriage behind them was cut in half by a horse sword and fell to the left and right, the young women and children who were huddled together inside also appeared in everyone's line of sight. Woo-woo. Save me, save me. Father. The cries and shouts were chaotic amidst the chaotic sounds of swords and sabers. A middle-aged man who was fighting with the black-clothed men in front could not help but panic when he heard the cries from behind. He wanted to turn around to take a look, but in a moment of carelessness, his arm was cut by a saber. Hiss. Master. When a woman saw this, she could not help but cry out in alarm. She came to his side and blocked the saber that was slashing towards him. Clang. When the saber and sword collided, sparks burst out. Several sharp swords and sabers were slashing towards her from all directions. Even though the woman's skills were extraordinary, it was still difficult for her to deal with them. Madam, don't worry about me. Go protect the children, the middle-aged man said anxiously. He did not care about his bleeding arm that was hanging limply by his side. He used his saber to block the saber and sword for his wife while using his body to protect her as they retreated to the carriage where the children were. The woman was also anxious. Those were her children. How could she not want to protect them? However, they were separated by 2 to 3 carriages and there were dozens of black-clothed men. Furthermore, each of them was far more powerful than the guards accompanying them. At this moment, even if she could protect the front, she could not protect the back. The children in the back were protected by the guards. Although they were panicking, they were not injured. However, the black-clothed men's sabers slashed down to kill. Clearly, they did not intend to let them live. Gradually, the guards who were covered in injuries could not hold on any longer. Whoosh! Bang! A sword aura attacked and the second carriage was sliced off, revealing the unconscious old man lying inside and the people guarding the old man. Father. When the middle-aged man saw the carriage's roof being sliced off and several black-clothed men leaping onto the carriage with swords in hand, his expression changed and he immediately rushed over. Master, be careful. The woman turned her head and saw a man in black holding a sword stabbing at her from behind. She was so shocked that she lost her sense of propriety and pounced forward. The man in black was caught off guard by the pouncing, so he immediately turned the sword in his hand and held it in a reverse grip, about to stab her from behind. Mother! Mother! When the younger child saw this scene, he cried and pushed away the people who were protecting him and ran over. However, the child's actions shocked his parents. No, no. Seeing the child run out and run towards the sword without any ability to protect himself, the woman cried out in horror, her voice mournful and sorrowful. What kind of pain could be worse than watching one's own child being killed in front of one's eyes? That was something that no mother could accept. Perhaps it was because the child's life was hanging by a thread. She subconsciously struggled to get up from the ground. She didn't care about the sharp swords that were stabbing and slashing at her. She ran out and threw the child to the ground, using her body to block the killing intent for him. Madam. Mother. Chapter 35:10. When Fengjiu and Shenyuan Mose walked out of the small forest, they saw the scene on the mountain path before they even got close. When she saw the black-clothed men brandishing their swords at the children and the woman, her eyes flashed. With a wave of her sleeve, the moment the airflow attacked, her blue figure had already rushed out. Before the sharp blades could take the lives of the mother and child, Fengjiu had saved them. The black-clothed men who attacked because of her intervention were also suddenly sent flying, heavily crashing into the trees by the side of the road. Pooh! Blood spurted out. The black-clothed men who were sent flying struggled for a while before finally lying down motionlessly. Who is it? How dare you meddle in other people's business? The leader of the black-clothed men's gloomy gaze swept over Fengjiu. The swords that were originally aimed at the middle-aged man were now aimed at Fengjiu. Standing not far away, Shenyuan Mo saw that these people actually dared to attack his woman. His eyes immediately turned cold. In the next moment, his figure swept out like a ghost. Except for Fengjiu, no one saw how he moved. They only knew that his figure swept past the surrounding area, and the black-clothed men fell one by one, with only a bleeding wound on their throat. As those people fell, the guards who were covered in injuries all stopped. They all looked in shock at the 2 people who had suddenly appeared, then looked at the dozens of black-clothed men's corpses on the ground. For a moment they were speechless. Even the children stopped crying because of this. They stared blankly at the bearded man who came to Fengjiu's side without a trace of blood on his body. Are you all right? Shenyuan Mose looked at Fengjiu from head to toe. When he saw that she was not injured by the sword chi, he was relieved. Although he knew that with her strength those people were nothing to her, but seeing her rush out like that, it really shocked him. Fengjiu glanced at him and smiled. I'm fine. At this moment, the pale-faced middle-aged man finally regained his senses. He brought his wife and child before the 2 of them. Many thanks to the 2 benefactors for saving our lives. Please accept the bow of my entire family. As he spoke, he knelt down without any hesitation. If it weren't for them, all of them would have died here today. Fengjiu didn't stop them from bowing. He only said, "It seems that your injuries aren't light. Quickly treat your wounds." As she spoke, her gaze moved away from them and landed on the dozens of corpses on the ground. She smiled and said, "Husband, these people should have a lot of valuable things on them. It seems that we have enough for our travel expenses." Hearing this, the corners of Shenyuan Mo's lips curled up slightly. His deep eyes were filled with adoration as he looked at her. "Then put these things away. Later we'll find a place to exchange them for money." "Okay." Fengjiu smiled and said, "Wait for me. I'll be done soon." As he spoke, he put away all the valuable things on the black-clothed men on the ground. Not to mention the guards, even the middle-aged man and his wife were dumbfounded. The strength of these two people seemed to be unfathomable, and they even killed those black-clothed men with a single move. They originally thought that they were experts, but looking at them now, it somewhat subverted their understanding of them. Chapter 35:11. You want these things? Fengjiu raised her eyebrows and glanced at him. No, I wouldn't dare." The middle-aged man waved his uninjured hand and said, "It's like this. I want to ask, are the two of you rogue cultivators? May I know where the two of you are heading? If you're going the same way, can you escort us home?" The middle-aged man looked at his remaining people with a grave expression and said, "I'm worried that we'll be ambushed on our way home. Now that we're injured or dead and there are children and old people, it's really doubt." While he was speaking, Fengjiu had already collected the things on the corpses. She didn't put them into her space, but put them in one of the people's Chengkuan bags. She tossed it in her hand and walked back to Shenyuan Mo's. The middle-aged man said and hurriedly said, "When we return to the residence, we'll definitely thank the two of you." Shenyuan Mo's didn't say anything and only looked at Fengjiu, waiting for her to make a decision. Fengjiu thought and asked, "How long is the journey from here? If it's too far, we won't go." It's not far. It's at most a day's journey." The middle-aged man said, "My residence is in one of the largest cities in the surrounding area. The two of you can go there and take a look." Fengjiu looked at Shenyuan Mo's and asked, "What do you think?" "Sure." Shenyuan Mo's nodded and said. Fengjiu smiled when she heard this, and she said to the middle-aged man, "All right. We'll protect you." "Thank you, benefactors." The woman also thanked them with the children and then went to the side to treat the wounds on their bodies. Fengjiu and Shenyuan Mo sat on the side. After their wounds were bandaged, the guards threw the corpses down the hill and repaired the carriages that could still be used. While the guards repaired the carriages, the middle-aged man went to Shenyuan Mo's and Fengjiu's side. While chatting with Fengjiu, he told them his name and family, and also explained why they were ambushed this time. "If we hadn't met the two of you this time, I'm afraid our entire family would have died here. The two of you are our benefactors." Fengjiu propped up his face with one hand and looked at one of the carriages. He asked casually, "So, the old man in the carriage is your father, and you brought him to seek medical treatment?" "Yes, because this trip was rather far, I brought the children with me. But I didn't expect the journey to be so uneventful, and my father's condition didn't improve at all." Yu Qingda sighed and said, "The person we went to seek medical treatment from was an extremely famous doctor, but even he couldn't do anything. We could only go back and ask around about the ghost doctor." Hearing this, Fengjiu raised his eyebrows. "The ghost doctor? The people here also knew her?" Seeing the woman in green raise her eyebrows and look at him with surprise, Yu Qingda explained, "Madam Ling, you may not know, but the ghost doctor isn't from the Tongtian continent. I heard that she was originally from a small country in the lower realm. Later on she came to the upper realm and is very famous. Moreover, her medical skills are very high. If she is willing to treat someone, even if they have one foot in the palace of the King of Hell, she can pull them back. Not to mention that we have never seen this kind of thing before, even the big families in the city have probably never come into contact with this kind of evil thing. This kind of thing is an evil and ominous existence, so no one would raise an evil goblet." Fengjiu walked back and sat beside Shenyuan Mo's. Yu Qingda and his wife hurriedly followed her. "Mrs. Ling, if it's really a poison, can you cure it?" "I can solve it, but it's a little troublesome," Fengjiu said. Seeing the two of them looking at her, she said, "I can't solve it now, I don't have everything I need." Hearing this, Yu Qingda couldn't help but become excited. "That is to say, if we have everything we can solve it?" "Yes, that's right." Fengjiu nodded. Chapter 35:13. He paused and looked at Fengjiu, saying solemnly, "As long as you can cure my father, Yu Qingda will not dare to disobey any of your orders." Fengjiu smiled, "All right, let your people rest and prepare to continue. Thus, after the group adjusted their mood, they continued on their journey with their injuries. Because a carriage was destroyed, the children could only stay with their parents. They even freed up 2 horses for Xianyuan Mose and Fengjiu. They did not stop along the way until the sky darkened. It was not suitable for them to continue on the journey, and the people of the Yu family were all injured and exhausted. Thus Yu Qingde, who was in front, got off the carriage and came to Fengjiu and Xianyuan Mose. Master Ling, Madam Ling, let's rest here tonight and continue on the journey tomorrow. Everyone is tired. I'm afraid that we won't be able to take it if we continue on. Hearing this, Xianyuan Mose looked at those people and nodded, and let's rest here. As he spoke, he got off the horse and came to Fengjiu's side to help her lead the horse and help her down. Are you tired? Let's sit over there. Xianyuan Mose held her hand and led her to the hillside to rest. The guards tied their horses to the side of a tree and helped the others down from the carriage. After resting for a while, some went to pick up branches to start a fire, some went to look for water, and some went to look for food. Fengjiu and Xianyuan Mose sat on the hillside and looked at the scenery in front of them, chatting softly. At this moment, they faintly heard Madame Yu's anxious voice. Master, what should we do? Xiaowu's whole body is hot and his face is so hot. There's still some distance from the city. What should we do if the fever continues at night? Yu Qingde looked at his youngest son who was being hugged by his wife, and there was some worry on his face. A child's fever could be severe or mild, and if the fever continued, his brain might be damaged. Let's cool him down first and see if there's any medicine in the medicine bag we brought along. I still have some wine here. Later we'll use the wine to wipe his body to cool off. As Yu Qingde spoke, he asked someone to look for the medicine in the medicine bag. At the same time, he instructed the other older children, all of you stay here and don't run around. Hearing that, Fengjiu looked back and said to Xianyuan Mose, I'll go take a look at them. There's probably a fever caused by the shock. Hearing this, Xianyuan Mose nodded. Go ahead. I'll go hunt some game and roast it for you. Fengjiu smiled. Okay. She stood up and suddenly reached out to hug him. She kissed him on the forehead before leaving. Xianyuan Mose froze for a moment, then watched her leave with light steps. His dark eyes couldn't help but be filled with gentleness and adoration. He reached out to touch his forehead that was kissed, then got up in high spirits and went to find some game for his wife. Fengjiu came to the carriage and asked, What's wrong? Is a child unwell? Madame Ling, Yu Qingde saw her and hurriedly called out, It's the youngest son. He had a fever after sleeping for a while and kept talking nonsense. Fengjiu smiled and raised his eyebrows. Master Yu, did you forget that I told you that I know a little about medicine? Chapter 35:14. Lady Yu carried her son and was about to come down when she was stopped by Fengjiu. You don't have to come down. Just sit out a little. Fengjiu said. After they sat out a little, he checked the child and said, It's a fever caused by the shock. It's not a big problem. Wait here for a while. He turned and walked towards the small forest. Yu Qingde and his wife were stunned and looked at each other. Lady Yu hesitated and said softly, Master, do you think Lady Ling is trustworthy? Does she really know medicine? Yu Qingde glanced at the green figure walking towards the small forest, paused for a moment and said, From my perspective, they should be capable people. Not to mention other things, just the fact that they were able to deal with dozens of black-clothed men in one move shows that they are not ordinary rogue cultivators. Hearing her husband's words, Lady Yu's anxious heart relaxed. She said softly, That's right. If it weren't for them, I'm afraid our family would have died on this road. She looked at Yu Qingde and said worriedly, Master, from the moment the old master fell, more and more people came to ambush us. I'm really worried. Alright, don't worry too much. Let's take care of the things in front of us first. Yu Qingde said and reached out to touch his son's forehead and held his palm. He felt that it was boiling hot and couldn't help but worry. He looked back and saw that Lady Ling was walking towards them with a bunch of herbs in her hand. Set up a fire and boil these herbs for him to drink. Fengjiu said and handed the herbs to him. With a move of her finger, she stuffed a thick pill made of herbs into the child's mouth. Yu Qingde saw this and said to his wife, It's windy at night. You and Xiaowu stay in the carriage. I'll boil the herbs and bring them over. Fengjiu said and turned to leave when he saw that Xianyuan Mose had returned. He walked towards Xianyuan Mose who was carrying the prey in his hand. Take a seat. I'll take care of the prey. Xianyuan Mose said and let her rest on the grassy slope. Hearing this, Fengjiu smiled and said, I'll go pick up some branches. He then asked, Do you need me to help you with the prey? No need, I can do it myself. Xinyuan Mo said. Although he hadn't done it himself for a long time, it was still common for him to deal with his prey when he was out. Seeing this, Fengjiu nodded and walked towards the small forest. Seeing this, Yu Qingda called out to her, "Mrs. Ling, let the guards pick up the branches. Sit down and rest for a while." "No need, I like to do it myself," Fengjiu said without turning his head and walked towards the small forest. Not long later he came back with a pile of branches. As night fell, the aroma of meat wafted through the mountain path. Feng Jiu and Xinyuan Mo's huddled around a small bonfire, while the Yu family huddled around a large bonfire. The aroma of meat wafted through the air, causing the injured and tired guards to salivate. After filling their stomachs, the Yu family guards, other than a few who were on night watch, rested with their backs against each other. Yu Qingda and his wife took care of a few children. After they fell asleep in the carriage, they kept checking to see if their youngest son's fever had subsided. Chapter 35:15. A gust of night wind blew. He opened his eyes and glanced at Fengjiu, who was sleeping on her stomach. A trace of tenderness flashed through his eyes. He reached out and pulled the cloak covering her body higher. But at this time, a burst of laughter sounded in the night. Ha ha ha. That voice was cold and harsh, containing a powerful pressure. Hearing the laughter echo in the night, the surrounding guards and others were already holding their heads and crying out. Hiss. My head hurts. Ah. Cries of pain and gasps rang out in the night, breaking the silence of the previous night. The children in the carriage were also suppressed by the sudden strong pressure, and they screamed in pain. The only one who was slightly better than the guards was Yu Qingda. Although his face was pale, he was still able to quickly draw his sword and protect the carriage. He shouted, "Who is it? Come out." Clearly, although the other party's pressure caused a certain amount of damage to him, he was not like the others who could only bear with it. Xinyuan Mo's and Fengjiu stood up and put away their cloaks. Fengjiu heard the crying of the children in the carriage and quickly walked forward. His hands formed a seal, and a boundary blocked the pressure for the children in the carriage. That person seemed to be surprised. He slowly walked out from the shadows and stared at Fengjiu, who was dressed in green and had an ordinary face. He frowned and said, "Who are you?" His gaze swept past Fengjiu and landed on Xinyuan Mo's, who was walking up from behind. For a moment he thought in his heart. "And who are you?" Fengjiu's brows furrowed slightly. He was very displeased to be awakened from his deep sleep. This old man is someone who came to take their lives. The man's face gradually became clear under the light of the bonfire. His face was ordinary, the corners of his eyes were inverted, and there was a gloomy coldness in his eyes. At this moment, as his voice fell, his gaze shifted from Fengjiu and Xinyuan Mo's to Yu Qingda, revealing a strange and sinister smile. "Surnamed Yu, there are some things that even if they are with you, you don't have the ability to possess them. If you are sensible and obediently hand them over, this old man might even leave your family members with intact corpses." When Yu Qingda heard this, his lips trembled and he was unable to say a single word. As expected, it was the fault of that thing again. Fengjiu glanced at them before turning his gaze back to the old man. He then said unhurriedly, "I don't care who you are. If you know what's good for you, leave everything behind and leave quickly. Otherwise your corpse will be the one left behind. You're courting death." The old man's sinister voice rang out, and as he spoke, he raised his hand and sent a stream of air towards Fengjiu. Xinyuan Mo's, who was standing beside Fengjiu, saw a flash of killing intent in his deep black eyes. He pressed down on Fengjiu's hand that was about to strike, and his black figure dashed forward. With a wave of his sleeve, he blocked the stream of air that the old man had sent towards him. Bang! Yu Qingda stood there in a daze. He only saw Master Ling dash forward and somehow appear behind the old man. He kicked out fiercely and the old man flew out with a groan, spitting out a mouthful of blood. Chapter 35:16. The old man's body was on fire. Even though he could not extinguish the fire, he did not care about his image and rolled on the ground. He only stood up when the sand on the ground extinguished the fire on his body. However, he was already in a sorry state and was gasping for breath. His back was in so much pain that it reached his chest. A trace of blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. He retreated in shock and looked in horror at the bearded man in black who was walking towards him step by step. "You, what do you want to do?" "Kill you." It was rare for Xinyuan Mo to say something like that. However, as soon as he finished speaking, the old man was shocked. Shenyuan Mose had already condensed a stream of air in his hand and pierced through his dantian, destroying it in one strike. Death came too quickly, and he didn't even have the chance to beg for mercy or scream in terror. All he could do was let out a muffled groan, and his body swayed for a moment. His knees gave way and he knelt straight in front of Shenyuan Mose until his head drooped, and he breathed his last in silence. Everyone in the Yu family saw this scene and could not help but swallow their saliva. They knew that this couple was very strong, but they did not expect that this old man with such strength would be instantly killed by Master Ling. Everyone was silent as if they were holding their breaths. They did not even dare to breathe loudly. Only the soft sound of the branches in the fire and the rustling of the leaves in the night breeze could be heard. The next morning, everyone set off again. However, not everyone's eyes were on the couple. In front of them, almost no one dared to be impudent. In the carriage, Lady Yu carried her youngest son who had already woken up. She happily said to her husband, "Old master, Madame Ling's medicine is really effective. Xiaowu's fever went down last night and he woke up as usual today." "That's good. We have to thank them properly when we get back." As Yu Qingda spoke, he leaned against the outside of the carriage and looked ahead as if he was thinking about something. Because Fengjiu felt a little sleepy, Shenyuan Mose let her ride the same horse with him. He let her sit in front of him and sleep in his arms. His cloak wrapped around her tightly, not letting anyone see her sleeping face at all. Fengjiu, who was in his arms, slept all the way until she felt something poking at her. She shifted her hips uncomfortably, but she didn't expect to fall in his arms and hear a suppressed gasp. She didn't even open her eyes as she murmured, "What's wrong?" She shifted her body and tried to find a more comfortable position in his arms. Who knew that there would always be something pressing against her? "It's nothing. Go back to sleep." Shenyuan Mose lowered his voice, but his voice was obviously a little hoarse. Along the way the two of them rode on the same horse. As the horse's hooves moved forward, the two of them on the horse also moved forward. No matter how good his willpower was, he still had a reaction to this kind of vague intimacy. In addition, the two of them had only been married for a few days. He, who had just tasted the ecstasy, couldn't help but feel a little restless. However, he still suppressed the restless heat that surged up. Just as he was about to move back a little and put some distance between them, who knew that in the next moment, his body would freeze. Chapter 35:17. Hiss. Shenyuan Mose panted heavily, and his ears immediately turned red. As for his face, it couldn't be seen because of his large beard. He looked at Fengjiu, who was looking up at him innocently, and whispered, "Are you trying to murder your husband?" Fengjiu's face couldn't help but turn red. She instinctively withdrew from his arms, but she forgot that she was on a horse. She almost fell off the horse because of her carelessness. "Little ancestor, behave yourself." His hoarse voice was helpless and sighed. He reached out to help her up and hugged her to his side. "Sit properly, don't move around." "I didn't move around, I was just being careless," she whispered. Thinking about what she had just done, she was so embarrassed that her cheeks burned. She looked around and saw that no one was paying attention to them. Moreover, the two of them were wearing cloaks. Only then did she feel relieved. Fortunately, no one saw them. Otherwise, it would have been so embarrassing. "Aren't you going to sleep?" Shenyuan Mose asked. He saw that she kept looking left and right, her eyes flashing and her face red. He couldn't help but find it funny. "I'm not going to sleep," Fengjiu said. She asked, "I'll go ask how long until we reach the city." As she spoke, she used one hand to support herself on the horse and the other to lift her cloak. She jumped off the horse and went forward. Seeing this, Shenyuan Mose didn't say anything. He only took a deep breath and suppressed the evil fire rising in his lower abdomen. Fengjiu, who had gone ahead, didn't return after asking. She sat in the carriage and chatted with Yu Qingda. After chatting for a while, she returned to Shenyuan Mose's side. "They said that we can enter the city before nightfall. When the time comes, they'll let us stay in their residence. What do you think?" Fengjiu asked. She held Shenyuan Mose's hand and used it to sit on the horse's back. "Anything is fine," Shenyuan Mose said. Then it's decided. We'll stay in their residence and treat their old man. At the same time, after they've settled down, we'll ask about the sovereign of Tongtian." "All right." The two of them chatted casually until evening when they really arrived at the city gate. "Master Ling, Madam Ling, it's right in front." Yu Qingda turned around and shouted. Seeing that they were finally home, he finally felt relieved. As they walked forward, they entered the city and followed the city road towards the Yu clan. However, Shenyuan Mose and Fengjiu, who had not yet settled down, said that they wanted to go out for a walk. They turned around and left without waiting for a reply. This city seems comparable to Hundred Rivers City, Fengjiu said as he walked. He looked around and saw that there was food at a small stall in front of them. He pulled Xinyuan Mose to the front. Fengjiu pulled Xinyuan Mose to sit down and called out, "Auntie, give us a portion of all the snacks." "Good, good, good. Please have a seat and have some tea," the old woman replied. She served them tea and retreated to prepare other things. "That's lotus seed soup, right? Give each of us a bowl first," Fengjiu said as she looked at the big pot of lotus seed soup placed on the stove at the side. The old woman scooped a bowl for each of them and placed it on the small table. She then brought over other snacks. "If it's not enough, there's more. They're all homemade. Eat while you eat. The rest will be served later." Hearing this, Fengjiu smiled. "Okay, we understand." Chapter 35:18. They were sitting in a corner a few meters away from those people. They saw those people pushing and shoving the old woman, shouting and cursing. Seeing this, her palm moved, and a silver needle shot out from her hand, silently shooting into the leader's body. The man who was about to grab the old woman's collar suddenly stiffened and his body fell straight to the ground. The men next to him saw this and quickly went forward to support him. Big brother, why did you faint all of a sudden? Quick, take him to the clinic." When those people saw that there was no response for a long time, they did not bother to look for trouble and quickly carried him to the clinic. The old woman stared blankly and only recovered after a long time. She shook her head and sighed. While tidying up the table and chairs that were kicked over, she muttered, "What a sin! You're so good but you don't look for work. You only know how to bully ordinary people like us." Xinyuan Mose drank the lotus seed soup and asked, "I'll accompany you to walk around the city later? See if there's anything you want to buy." "Sure." Fengjiu smiled and drank the lotus seed soup. Then he took out 2 gold coins and placed them on the table, then got up and left. The old woman looked at the gold coins and could not help but be stunned. "The two of you, you don't need so much. It's okay, take it." Fengjiu turned around and smiled. When she withdrew her gaze, she met a pair of eyes that were sizing her up. She glanced at that person and then withdrew her gaze indifferently. She held Xinyuan Mose's hand and left. The man who was sitting not far away looked at the two people leaving together with a trace of thoughtfulness in his eyes. Not long after, he got up and followed behind them unhurriedly. Who were Xinyuan Mose and Fengjiu? With their cultivation, they were able to sense the people behind them when they were being followed. It should be the man who was not far from the stall. He probably saw me make a move, but I don't know why he's following me. Fengjiu smiled. He held Xinyuan Mose's hand and walked slowly. They didn't look back as if they didn't know that someone was following them. "Get rid of him at the intersection ahead," Xinyuan Mose said. He didn't turn around and just looked at the road ahead. The man behind them did not know that he had been discovered and continued to follow them. He was trying to guess who these two people were. However, as he followed them, he realized that the two people in front of him had disappeared. He was startled and quickly stepped forward. He looked left and right but didn't see the two figures. He couldn't help but frown. Who are those people? With my strength, how could I lose him? Helpless, he could only walk around and see if he could meet him again. Not long after he left, Xinyuan Mose walked out from a corner with Fengjiu in his arms. Looking at the departing man, Xinyuan Mose looked away and said to Fengjiu, "Let's go. Let's go to the night market." The husband and wife strolled around the night market and admired the moon. They didn't return to the Yu residence even when the sky was dark. At the Yu residence, Yu Qingde, who had settled his family down, walked around the main door from time to time, looking around and waiting for them to return. "Master, you can go in. I'll take care of things here. When Master Ling and the rest come back, I'll bring them to rest," the housekeeper said as he looked at his master's bandaged hand and couldn't help but sigh. Chapter 35:19. Master Ling, Madam Ling, you're back. Fengjiu was a little surprised to see him. "You were waiting for us?" "I wanted to wait for you to come back and bring you to the courtyard to rest. I wanted to see if there was anything wrong so that I could get the servants to prepare again," Yu Qingde said with a smile. In front of the two of them, it could be said that he had put down his position as the head of the family. Hearing this, Fengjiu smiled. "There's no need to trouble yourself. We won't be staying here for long anyway. Anything will do." "How can that be? The two of you are the saviors of the Yu family. You are our esteemed guests. We cannot neglect you." As he spoke, he personally brought the two of them into the courtyard that had been prepared for them. "Master Ling, Madam Ling, I prepared this small courtyard for the two of you. See if there's anything you need to add so that I can get the servants to make the arrangements. Fengjiu took a look at the courtyard and said, there's no need. It's fine like this. In that case, the two of you should rest early. After all, you haven't had a good rest on the way here. I won't disturb the two of you any further. He bowed slightly and then left with the housekeeper. Xinyuan Mose and Fengjiu walked into the courtyard. The two maidservants in the courtyard bowed and opened the door for them. Prepare the water for the bath. Fengjiu looked at the two maidservants and instructed them. Then he walked into the room. Yes. The two maidservants replied and then left to prepare. At night after bathing, the two of them sat on the bed. Xinyuan Mose was reading a book in his hands while Fengjiu leaned in his arms. Mose, when do you think we can advance to the level of supreme martial artist? The two of them were now supreme martial artists. In the world, it seemed that the strongest supreme martial artist was only a supreme martial artist. There had never been any news of a supreme martial artist being born. With their current strength, if they were to advance to the supreme being level and become supreme being experts, how much would their strength increase? It's said that there hasn't been a sovereign expert for several million years. Even if a God King expert reaches the peak, he wouldn't dare to attempt to break through so easily and attempt to become a sovereign expert. Xinyuan Mose said in a deep voice, neither hurriedly nor slowly. His gaze was still on the book. Upon hearing this, Fengjiu was slightly surprised and asked, why? There was once a peak-level divine king monarch who attempted to break through to the supreme being level, but unfortunately he died. Later on, there were others who refused to believe that no one could break through to the supreme being level. They also tried to break through, but they all died one after another. Therefore, it was rumored that no cultivator in this world could reach the supreme being level. Upon hearing this, Fengjiu was slightly startled. He said, becoming a supreme being requires one to undergo the tempering of the heavenly way. Perhaps they died because they couldn't pass the heavenly way and not because they couldn't break through. No one knows the heavenly way. As for the specific reason, no one knows. We only know that there isn't a single supreme being expert in this world. Furthermore, even a supreme martial artist who has reached the level of supreme martial artist cannot cultivate to the peak. Why is that? Fengjiu asked curiously. He had never heard of this before. Chapter 35:20. So that's the reason? She was a little surprised and couldn't help but think about it. If that was the case, what would happen when they reached the peak in the future? Pills won't help. She sat up straight and asked him. I've never heard of it. However, I reckon that by that time, pills won't have much effect. Xinyuan Mose said as he held her hand. Don't worry, that's for others. If it were us, it wouldn't happen. Fengjiu couldn't help but smile when he heard that. Why are you so confident? Xinyuan Mose smiled and said, because we're the Emperor Star and the Phoenix Star. We're destined by the heavens. If there's anyone in this world who can reach the prime level, it can only be the two of us. But I haven't found a way to deal with the Master of the Black Lotus. That Black Lotus is very powerful. If we fight head-on, I'm worried. She frowned, worried about this strong opponent. Xinyuan Mose paused for a moment and said, logically speaking, your chaotic green lotus should be able to suppress his Black Lotus. The chaotic green lotus is a chaotic treasure and is also known as the Genesis green lotus or the cleansing green lotus. It nurtures 4 lotus seeds in the heart of the lotus, and one of them is the Black Lotus of destruction. I think that the green lotus in your body doesn't just transport life force. It should have other uses such as suppressing the power of the Black Lotus. It just hasn't been exploited yet. Fengjiu fell into deep thought when he heard that. He murmured softly, what kind of opportunity does it require? How can it activate the true power of the green lotus in my body? Sleep. It's getting late. We'll find out in the future. He lay down on the bed and pulled her into his embrace. He pulled the blanket up and covered her with it. Fengjiu didn't think too much about it. That's right, she'll find out one day. Since that's the case, there's no need to rush. What's more, she had no clue at all. She couldn't think of anything no matter how hard she tried. Hugging the person beside her, smelling the familiar scent on his body, feeling his strong and powerful arms around her waist, her heart gradually calmed down. She found a comfortable position in his arms and closed her eyes to sleep. The next morning, after Xinyuan Mose and Fengjiu woke up and ate breakfast, she wrote some things for Yuqingda to prepare. Today they did not plan to go out, they just wanted to lie in the courtyard. After Yuqingda prepared all the things she needed, they would leave after drawing out the cupworm for old man Yu. At this moment, she didn't know that Yuqingda had personally prepared everything, but things weren't going very smoothly. In the 100 Herbs building in the city, Yu Qingda had bought all the elixirs he needed. At this time he was waiting to buy the last ingredient. Because the other party had brought the ingredients for him to look at, he first sat down in the private room and drank a cup of tea. However, after waiting for a while, the steward came in empty-handed and apologetically. "Patriarch Yu, I'm really sorry. I originally wanted to bring the 1,000 blood red heart grass over, but I didn't expect that someone would also take a fancy to that spirit herb. This." Chapter 35:21. Being interrupted, the steward's face didn't look too good. He glanced at Yu Qingda before squeezing out a smile and said, "Patriarch Yu, our 100 Herb building has always followed the rules when doing business. Didn't I come to inform you about this matter? Actually, the decision still lies with you. After all, you've already paid half of the price. As long as you pay the other half, this spirit herb will be yours. However, the customer said that he knows you and knows that it's the spirit herb you want. He wants to meet you and discuss it with you." Hearing this, Yu Qingda frowned and only said, "Bring the spirit herb here. I'm in a hurry to return." Obviously, he didn't want to meet the person he knew. This spirit herb was one of the important medicinal catalysts that Madame Ling had mentioned. Even if the other party knew him, he couldn't take this spirit herb from him. Thus there was no need to meet him. Seeing this, the manager responded and turned to fetch the spirit herb. However, just as he returned with the spirit herb, an old man in gray robes followed behind him. "I didn't think that it would be so difficult for this old man to meet you." The old man walked in with a displeased expression and looked at Yu Qingda in the room. "Yang, Elder Yang? Why are you here? Why are you here?" Seeing the person who had come, Yu Qingda couldn't help but be startled. He hurriedly stood up and bowed to him. The old man in front of him was the famous doctor Elder Yang. Not only was he a famous doctor, but he was also an alchemy saint. He had extremely high prestige on this mainland. Some time ago he had brought his family to seek treatment from him. He didn't expect to see him here. The old man walked in with his hands behind his back. He glanced at the box that the manager had placed on the table and said, "This old man heard that there was 1,000 blood red heart herb here and specially rushed over. I didn't expect to hear that this spirit herb had already been bought by you." "Yes, I was one step ahead of Elder Yang. It's because my old father is waiting for this spirit herb to save his life. Therefore, Elder Yang, I'm really sorry. I can't let you have this spirit herb," Yu Qingda said apologetically. If it were anyone else it would be fine, but this person was Elder Yang. Even if he refused, he had to smile. After all, no matter who he offended, he would never offend a doctor who could save lives. Hearing his words, the old man frowned. "Your father? Who told you that your father needed the 1,000 blood red heart grass? This 1,000 blood red heart grass is poisonous by itself, and ordinary people are unable to refine its poison. If one consumes an unrefined 1,000 blood red heart grass, it will be a fatal poison." As the old man spoke, he shook his head and looked at him. "You're really reckless in order to save your father. If you give this 1,000 blood red heart grass to your father, in less than half an incense stick's worth of time, your father will be powerless to save the situation." Hearing that, Yu Qingda was stunned and said, "Well, I don't think so. Mrs. Ling, who helped my father, said that as long as I brought the things back, she could wake my father up. She knows medicine. Since she said so, she must have a way." Chapter 35:22. "What? Madame Ling? You're saying that the person who treated your father's illness is actually a woman?" When the old man heard this, he immediately glared at Yu Qingda, fuming with rage. Yu Qingda was stunned for a moment before replying, "That's right. I met Madame Ling on my way back and we traveled together. She said that she could cure my father's illness and wake him up, so I did as she said and prepared the spiritual herbs." "Ridiculous. You actually believe the words of a mere woman? That's ridiculous," he berated, glaring at Yu Qingda with a face full of anger. "So you're saying that you think that a woman like her is better than this old man, the medicine saint? A disease that even this old man couldn't cure, but a woman like her can? And you actually believed her? That's ridiculous." Yu Qingda was a little embarrassed. Indeed, if he believed that Madame Ling could cure his father, wouldn't that mean that he felt that Madame Ling was better than Elder Yang? However, when he thought of the calm and confident Madame Ling, his heart was really biased towards her. After all, the couple was not ordinary people. Seeing the old man's angry expression, he knew that continuing the conversation would only make the atmosphere even more awkward. Moreover, Madame Ling was still waiting for his medicine in the residence. Thus, after some thought, he said, "Elder Yang, how about this? You come back to the residence with me, and you'll naturally know what happened when you see Madame Ling. If this 1,000 blood red heart herb really can't save my father, I'll give it to you as an apology. How about that? Elder Yang snorted with his hands behind his back. He also felt that there was no point in talking to him here, so he immediately said, "All right. This old man wants to see just what kind of amazing doctor this Madame Ling is. She can actually cure an illness that even this old man said couldn't be cured? Let's go. Lead the way." Yuqingda smiled. After inspecting the medicine, he gave the remaining money to the steward and let him handle it. Then he put away the spirit medicine on the table and brought old Yang back to the mansion. After sending the two out, the steward suppressed the astonishment in his heart. After watching the two leave, he turned and walked inside, thinking to himself, "Everyone in the city knows that Master Yu's father is seriously ill. I heard that he can't hold on any longer." Some time ago, the entire family went to Elder Yang's place to seek medical treatment, and they only returned yesterday. Now that he says that a woman can cure him, he's probably been deceived. As he walked inside, he bumped into the owner of the 100 Herbs Tower. "Didn't I hear that Elder Yang came? Why didn't I see him?" "Tower Lord, Elder Yang went to the Yu clan. He just left with Patriarch Yu," the housekeeper said. "You went to the Yu? Didn't clan head Yu ask Elder Yang to treat his father not long ago? Why did you go there again?" the tower master asked in surprise. Thus, the steward quickly told him about what had happened just now. "Ling, there was such a thing? That's strange." The owner smiled. At this time, another steward walked out and said, "Master, Steward Lin, that Elder Yang forgot to take away the spiritual herbs that he bought." Hearing this, the owner smiled and said, "Since I have nothing to do, go and bring the herbs over. I'll send them to Elder Yang and watch the show while I'm at it." Hearing this, the two of them were startled. Steward Lin said, "That Madame Ling that Master you mentioned might be a swindler. Why does Master have to make this trip?" Chapter 35-23. The two stewards looked at each other in astonishment. Not necessarily? Could it be that the tower head had received some news? Inside the Yu residence, Yuqingda invited Elder Yang to sit in the hall before going to invite Fengjiu over. When he arrived at the rear courtyard, he saw the two people sunbathing in the courtyard. He called out, "Master Ling, Madame Ling, have you prepared everything?" Fengjiu asked Yuqingda, who was standing outside the courtyard. "Yes, everything has been prepared." Yuqingda paused for a moment before continuing, "Madame Ling, when I went to the 100 Herbs building to buy spiritual medicine, I ran into Elder Yang." As he spoke, he realized that she might not know who Elder Yang was, so he explained, "He's the famous doctor we went to seek treatment from this time. He came for the 1,000 blood red heart grass, but I unexpectedly bought it first, and then he explained the matter to her and said apologetically, I really couldn't refuse. Right now he's sitting in the front hall." Fengjiu smiled, "So it's like that. It's fine, I'll go see him." She stood up and said to Xinyuan Mose, "I'll be right back." Xinyuan Mose responded. After watching her leave with Yuqingda, he closed his eyes and closed them for a moment. In the front hall, Elder Yang was drinking tea. When he heard footsteps outside, he put down his teacup and looked over. His gaze naturally went past Yuqingda and landed on the green-clothed woman next to him. He sized her up and asked in an unfriendly tone, "You're that Madame Ling?" She looked so young, but she actually said that she knew medicine. She even said that she could treat illnesses that he couldn't. She was really going too far. Fengjiu glanced at him and smiled, "That's right." She walked forward and sat down on a chair. She turned to look at Yuqingda. "What about those things? Let me have a look." It was obvious that she didn't think much of Elder Yang. Her actions infuriated Elder Yang. He slammed the table heavily and roared, "That 1,000 blood red heart grass is poisonous. How dare you say that you can give it to his father? Do you want him to die faster?" Fengjiu glanced at him and asked unhurriedly, "Who are you? Why are you meddling in my business?" Yuqingda, who was at the side, saw that the two of them were not on good terms. Just as he was about to mediate the situation, he heard Elder Yang snort loudly, "Humph! This little woman didn't know who he was. The one sitting in front of you is the respected alchemy saint." Fengjiu raised his eyebrows. "I heard from clan head Yu that his father's illness can't be cured?" Elder Yang frowned. "So what if this old man can't cure him? Do you think you can cure him?" "Not only can you not cure him, but you also don't know what kind of illness he has, right? You can't even see these symptoms, yet you still have the nerve to say that you're the respected alchemy saint?" Fengjiu's voice carried a hint of a smile. Her casual tone and the nonchalant expression on her face made Elder Yang angry. Elder Yang stood up angrily and pointed at Fengjiu, shouting, You're too presumptuous. Clan head Yu quickly stepped forward. Elder Yang, please sit down first. Don't be angry. As he spoke, he took out the things he had prepared and placed them on the tea table. Madam Ling, do you think these things are all right? Is there anything else missing? Chapter 35-24. When she walked out, she happened to see the housekeeper leading someone in. She glanced at that person and walked towards the backyard. Patriarch Yu put away the things on the tea table and said to the old man, Elder Yang, since it's like this, why don't we go together? Alright, this old man wants to see what kind of ability she has to be so arrogant and rude. Elder Yang flicked his sleeves and walked out. When he saw the person who walked in, he couldn't help but be surprised. Tower Master Bailey? Why are you here? Elder Yang, the medicinal herbs you bought were left in my building. When I heard the housekeeper's report, I wanted to come and take a look, so I brought the herbs for you. He said with a smile and cupped his hands towards Yu Qingda. I hope Patriarch you won't blame me for coming uninvited. No. Yu Qingda was surprised, but he still said with a smile. After all, it was usually very difficult for him to see the Tower Master of the 100 Herbs building. He didn't expect that he would come today. Was it because of Master Ling and Madam Ling in his residence? It just so happens that we were just about to go see how that woman rescued her father. Since Pavilion Master Bailey has come as well, then why don't we go together? As Elder Yang spoke, he glanced at Yu Qingda and said, Let's go quickly. This old man doesn't believe that woman can save your father. Your father's life might be hanging by a thread because of her. Seeing this, Yu Qingda could only say, Please both of you. Then he led them to the backyard. Fengjiu went to sit in Patriarch Yu's courtyard and waited for Yu Qingda's arrival. He saw that Yu Qingda was here, accompanied by Elder Yang and the person he met earlier. Madam Ling, Yu Qingda went forward and put the things on the table. Madam Ling, you've met Elder Yang. This is the Tower Master of the 100 Herbs building. Fengjiu nodded lightly and looked at them with interest, asking, What do you want to do? See how I will save him. This old man is here to see how you will deceive people, so that you won't harm that old Master Yu's life. As Elder Yang spoke, he felt that this woman was an eyesore. Fengjiu propped up his chin with one hand and said lazily, I still need to concoct medicine. Are you guys here to help? If you don't want to help, then you have to leave. Help. Old Yang was stunned for a moment before glaring angrily at Yang Kai. You want this old master to help you? Fengjiu curled his lips. It's your blessing to be able to help me. You. Old Yang was so angry that he was gasping for breath. This old man, I have never seen a woman as thick-skinned as you. This old man is a dignified alchemy saint. You actually dare to ask me to be your assistant? How preposterous. Patriarch Yu, I don't like people to disturb me when I'm grinding medicine. Please ask those who have no business here to leave. She was already being polite. She even used the word, ask, instead of, chase them away. Seeing this, Patriarch Yu couldn't help but look at Elder Yang and Tower Master Bailey. He said hesitantly, The two of you look. Speaking of which, I haven't concocted medicine for a long time. I'm happy to help this madam. Tower Master Bailey said with a smile. He stepped forward and cupped his hands in greeting. His gaze fell on Fengjiu. Seeing this, Elder Yang took a deep breath and said, Fine. This old man wants to see what kind of ability you have. If you don't have the ability, don't blame this old man for settling the score later. Chapter 35-25. Who do you think you are? What do you have that can make this old man shocked and inexplicably shocked? With your deceitful tricks, this old man would be ashamed to tell others about them. Elder Yang sneered disapprovingly. House Master Bailey's eyes flashed as he looked at the green-clothed woman. He smiled and said, Madam, there is no need to worry. Bailey Bowen doesn't like to gossip, so he won't say much. Hearing this, Fengjiu glanced at him. Seeing his natural and unrestrained manner, she didn't say anything else. She only said, All right then. I'll do the talking and you guys do the work. First, process the spirit herbs on the table. Grind the leaves into juice for later use. Thus, Yu Qingda, who was standing at the side, saw the two prominent figures actually roll up their sleeves and fight for Madam Ling in the courtyard. He was a little stunned. Elder Yang and Bailey Bowen were grinding the medicine and doing as she requested. They also occasionally looked at her sitting there and mixing something with a few small transparent bottles. As time passed, the two assistants also handed the medicine to her. They watched as she placed everything on the tray, then got up and walked inside. "Bring the things in," Fengjiu said without turning her head. She only told them to follow. When Yu Qingda saw this, he quickly went forward and said with a smile, "Please come in. I'll carry the things." As he spoke, he went forward and took the things on the tray. The room was bright and spacious. On the bed in the inner room, the skinny old man was lying on it weakly. His face was dark and without light. If it wasn't for his slightly rising and falling chest, he would probably be no different from a dead person. "Take off his clothes." Fengjiu went to the basin to wash her hands and had Yu Qingda put the tray on the small table beside her. Yu Qingda went forward and took off his father's clothes. Elder Yang went forward to take a look and shook his head. "It's already like this. It looks like he won't make it through this month." Hearing this, Fengjiu glanced at Elder Yang, who was sighing, and said in an infuriating tone, "That's because he met you. If he met me, he naturally wouldn't die." Elder Yang's face instantly darkened when he heard this, and he felt like his dignity had been challenged. He gazed at the little woman and said, "Let me see how you'll turn the situation around and pull back someone who's already on the verge of death. If I save him, what will you do?" She raised her eyebrows and asked. Forced into a corner, he snorted and said, "If you save him, this old man will kowtow to you 3 times and call you master. Go to the main gate of the Yu residence and shout loudly 3 times that your skills are not as good as mine. You are convinced?" Hearing this, Fengjiu waved his hand. "Don't. You're so old. I'm not interested in taking you as my disciple." As he spoke, he took out the silver needles and came to the bedside. "Don't make a fuss when I'm treating, and don't make any noise. If you disturb me, don't blame me for being impolite." Bailey Bowen listened to the soft voice, and the doubt in his heart grew. Where did this person come from? This light voice carried a faint warning, causing his heart to involuntarily tighten when he heard it, not daring to be impudent. Chapter 35-26. He saw that the tendons and veins in Patriarch Yu's skinny body were slightly protruding, and in one of the veins there were a few bulges as if there was a small worm wriggling inside. It made his hair stand on end. Not to mention him, even Patriarch Yu and Elder Yang's expressions changed when they saw this. Patriarch Yu was still alright, at least he knew that his father had been poisoned by someone. Elder Yang, on the other hand, only knew what was going on after seeing it. The visual impact caused his expression to change instantly. "It's actually a poison," Elder Yang muttered, his eyes filled with disbelief. He never thought that old man Yu would be unconscious because of a poison. For a moment, he looked with a complicated gaze at the green-clothed woman who used silver needles to seal old man Yu's veins. He didn't understand how such an inconspicuous woman could tell that he had been poisoned by a poison. He knew medicine, so he naturally knew about poisons, but he couldn't see the poison in old man Yu's veins and couldn't feel his pulse. Earlier, he was still saying that this woman was lying, but now, seeing her precise needles and her practiced movements, he knew that he had really met someone more skilled than him. However, why did this person have to be a woman? "Pinch his mouth open," Fengjiu said as he picked up the medicine at the side. Patriarch Yu hurriedly went forward and helped to pinch his father's mouth open. He watched as Madame Ling poured the medicine into his father's mouth. Not long after, the worm wriggling in the veins moved even more violently. When Fengjiu saw this, he increased the speed of his needles. At the same time he instructed, "Make a cut on his middle finger. Edifice Lord Bailey, use the bottle containing the 1,000 blood-red heart herbs juice to catch his blood." Okay. Patriarch Yu hurriedly took out a small knife and cut his father's hand. Just as he was about to use the bottle containing the medicine to catch the blood, he saw Bailey Bowen take the bottle and say, "Let me do it." Fengjiu glanced at Bailey Bowen and instructed, "Tower Lord Bailey, do you see it? Make sure to catch the cup mixed with fresh blood." Bailey Bowen's eyelids twitched when she looked at him. When he heard that she was going to catch the cup bug mixed in the blood, the corners of his mouth twitched involuntarily. He braced himself and said, "Mrs. Ling, don't worry. I will catch it." Elder Yang only stared at Elder Yu's body. He saw that after the woman used the silver needles to seal the blood vessels, the cup worms wriggled along the blood vessels on his arm. Step by step, the cup worms were forced to fly out of the blood vessels with a whoosh. "Catch it!" Elder Yang shouted. He saw that the goo actually wanted to escape. It flew out of the blood vessels at an extremely fast speed. Even he could barely see its speed. Bailey Bowen's brows twitched. The mouth of the bottle that was originally connected to his finger turned in his hand. He took a step back and caught the cup worms that were about to escape. In the next moment, the cup worms mixed in the blood also flew out and fell into the transparent bottle containing the large cup worms one by one. Looking at the mixture of medicine and blood in the transparent bottle and the worms wriggling there, Bailey Bowen felt a wave of disgust. The hair on his body stood on end. Chapter 35-27. Feng Jiu fed him a bottle of medicinal liquid after cleaning up the cup worm in old Master Yu's body. She then said, "Bandage the wound on your finger. I'll write a prescription when we get back and have someone brew it for him to take a bath." As she spoke, she put away the things and washed her hands. She then said to Patriarch Yu, "The cup bug in the bottle won't be able to survive. You can deal with it later." "Okay." Master Yu hurriedly replied. He then asked, "Madame Ling, when will my father wake up? Is his body fine?" "He's fine now. He just needs to recuperate. He'll wake up after bathing," Feng Jiu said as she walked out. "Wait." Master Yang chased after her. "What?" Feng Jiu stopped and looked at him with interest. "I apologize for doubting you and not trusting you," Master Yang said. He gritted his teeth and was about to kneel down and kowtow to her. Feng Jiu raised her eyebrows. Seeing that he was about to kneel, she waved her sleeve and said slowly, "There's no need to kneel. I don't want to take you in as a disciple." Master Yang knelt down on both knees, but no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't kneel down. It was as if there was a pair of hands holding him up. He couldn't kneel down and his legs gradually straightened. He was shocked. He looked at the woman in green who turned and walked out. He stood there in a daze. Bailey Bowen's eyes flashed when he saw the scene that had just taken place. She was indeed not simple. "Master Yang, I told you. Master Ling and Madame Ling aren't liars. They even saved me on the way here. We met by chance. They really aren't scheming people." Master Yu walked out and said to Master Yang, who was still standing there in a daze. Master Yang recovered and looked at him. He asked, "Master Ling and Madame Ling? What's their full name? It's impossible for such a person to be a nobody. I don't know where they came from. I only know that they aren't ordinary people." Patriarch Yu said, "You two please help yourselves. I'll instruct the servants to brew the medicine." After saying that, he left first. Bailey Bowen looked at the sky and smiled. "It's getting late. I think I should go back. Elder Yang, goodbye." He cupped his hands and walked out. Elder Yang glanced at him, then looked at the sky. He pursed his lips and strode out with his hands behind his back. Just as Bailey Bowen stepped out of the house, Master Yang followed him out. Bailey Bowen, who was going to leave in the future, stopped and was about to call him out. Unexpectedly, Master Yang looked at the people on the street and suddenly took a deep breath. Seeing him like this, his eyelids twitched and he couldn't help but take a few steps back to put some distance between them. In the next moment, Elder Yang's voice rang out in front of the Yu family's house. "I Yang am not as skilled as others. I'm sincerely convinced by Madame Ling. I'm not worthy of being called the medicine saint. I Yang am sincerely convinced by Madame Ling. I'm not worthy of being called the medicine saint. I Yang am sincerely convinced by Madame Ling. I'm not worthy of being called the medicine saint." Chapter 35-28. Isn't that the famous Senior Yang who is known as the medical sage? Why is he shouting in front of the Yu residence? Did something happen? Someone recognized Elder Yang's identity and was puzzled as to why such a distinguished guest of the major clans was doing such a strange thing. Didn't they say that the old master of the Yu family was seriously ill? I heard that the Yu family went to Elder Yang's place to seek treatment and just came back. Why is Elder Yang here? From what he said, could it be that someone cured old Master Yu's illness? How is that possible? Elder Yang's medical skills are widely recognized. If he can't cure an illness, who else can? Then what is he doing now? He admitted that his skills are inferior and accepted wholeheartedly. Also, who is this Madame Ling he mentioned? I've never heard of her. That's right. How strange, it sounds like Madame Ling cured old Master Yu's illness and Elder Yang is wholeheartedly convinced. In the restaurants and shops on both sides of the street, many cultivators and aristocratic clans who heard Elder Yang's words began to discuss in low voices. However, no matter how much they discussed, they didn't know anything about the Yu family. Thus, they sent people to inquire about it. When Housemaster Bailey, who was standing not far from Elder Yang, saw this, he couldn't help but cup his hands and say, "Elder Yang, I'm impressed, I'm impressed." This kind of courage was not something an ordinary person could possess. Especially with his reputation, he actually dared to say such words and do such a thing. This was even more admirable. With his temperament, it was no wonder that he was respected everywhere. At the same time, in the Yu residence, when Fengjiu returned to the courtyard, she saw that Xinyuan Mose was no longer in the courtyard. She went straight into the room and saw him sitting cross-legged on the bed cultivating. She poured a cup of water for him and smiled with narrowed eyes as she said, "Husband, I'm back. Is the matter resolved?" Xinyuan Mose opened his eyes and looked at her. And it wasn't difficult to resolve. "I've already extracted the goo from old Master Yu's body." As she spoke, she heard 3 shouts of "his skills are inferior" and wholeheartedly convinced from outside. Fengjiu couldn't help but frown. "I didn't expect this old man to be so stubborn. He actually went outside the residence to shout? You're really willing to put down your pride." She shook her head and chuckled as she came to his side. "Tonight, let's find some time to ask the Yu family head about Sovereign Tong Tian. After that, we'll leave tomorrow." "Okay." Xinyuan Mose smiled. In the evening, Yu Qingda saw that his father had indeed woken up from the medicinal bath as Madame Ling had said. He couldn't help but shed tears of joy. After helping his father lie down, he hurried to their courtyard. "Master Ling, Madame Ling, my father is awake." He walked into the courtyard happily and said to the 2 people who were playing chess, "Wake up and recuperate for a while. You'll be able to recover." Fengjiu said and gestured, "Sit. I happen to have something to ask you." "Yes, yes." He sat down at the table. When he sat down, he looked at the 2 of them and felt that sitting at the same table with them made him feel nervous and oppressed. "Patriarch Yu, we would like to know more about Sovereign Tong Tian. Please tell us more about him," Fengjiu said directly. He looked at the 2 of them in surprise. He didn't expect them to ask about Sovereign Tong Tian. For a moment his expression changed slightly. Chapter 35-29. No, it's not inconvenient. Since the 2 of you have asked, I will tell you everything I know." Yu Qingda hurriedly said and told them about the Sovereign of the Sky-reaching sect. Outside, the people who couldn't get any information could only stare at the Yu residence. Some people thought about it and found Elder Yang, wanting to know what was going on from his mouth. However, no matter how they asked, they couldn't get anything out of him. However, some doctors who wanted to become famous couldn't hold back. When they found out that even Elder Yang was convinced that his skills were inferior, some people who wanted to use Madame Ling as a stepping stone went to the Yu residence, wanting to meet this Madame Ling. What kind of existence was Elder Yang? He was the famous alchemy saint that all the aristocratic families had to show some respect to. Now that he had lost to Madame Ling for some unknown reason, as long as they could defeat Madame Ling, their status would naturally be different. This was the time for them to become famous. Thinking of this, those doctors didn't care that it was late at night and went to the Yu residence. They said that they were visiting, but they were actually going for Madame Ling. In the 100 Herbs building, Bailey Bowen was thinking. In fact, he couldn't guess Madame Ling's identity. In this mainland he had never heard of a Madame Ling with superb medical skills. However, to be able to make Elder Yang admit defeat, this person was indeed capable. Building master, building master. The steward hurriedly ran in and shouted outside, but didn't dare to push the door open. "Come in," Bailey Bowen said from inside. Steward Lin pushed the door open and came in. He walked quickly to Bailey Bowen. "Building master, there are many people gathered in front of the Yu residence, saying that they want to see Madame Ling's medical skills." The Yu residence closed the door and those people are now arguing outside the Yu residence. Steward Lin reported. Because the pavilion head had instructed him to keep an eye on the movements of the Yu clan, he would immediately come and report if there was any movement over there. Hearing this, Bailey Bowen laughed softly. "This is very normal. Who told Elder Yang to admit defeat to Madame Ling when he shouted 3 times in front of the Yu residence? Now that this trouble has arisen, what about Elder Yang? There's no movement?" Elder Yang has already rushed over after learning of the matter. As for the specifics, his subordinates have yet to report back. As Steward Lin spoke, he glanced at his master and couldn't suppress the curiosity in his heart as he asked, "Tower Master, who exactly is that Madame Ling? Is his medical skills really better than Elder Yang's? Don't ask about things you shouldn't ask about. You may leave." He waved his hand indicating for him to leave. "Then do we still need to keep an eye on the Yu clan?" Steward Lin asked again. Bailey Bowen thought for a moment and said, "Keep an eye on him." Although he knew that Madame Ling would not care about this matter, he wanted to know how she would deal with it now that things had gotten out of hand. "Yes." Steward Lin responded and then left. On the other hand, in the Yu mansion, Yu Qingda was apologetic after hearing about the situation outside. Madam Ling, don't worry. I won't let those people come in and disturb you. I've already sent them away. It doesn't matter. We were planning to leave tomorrow anyway, Fengjiu said casually while eating the pastries. Chapter 35:30. Fengjiu shook his head. No, we still have matters to attend to, so we won't be staying here for long. As for your father, he just needs to recuperate. Patriarch Yu sat there with his eyes narrowed. No one knew what he was thinking. Xinyuan Mo's and Fengjiu's eyes flashed as they sized him up. Patriarch Yu, is there anything else? Xinyuan Mo's asked. His deep voice contained the pressure of a superior, which naturally made people's hearts tighten. Patriarch Yu instinctively raised his head to look at the two of them. He hesitated for a moment, then said, Master Ling, Madam Ling, you haven't known me for long, but I've already told you about the situation in my family. Ever since my father was poisoned, there have been constant assassinations. Actually, this is not without reason. Hearing this, Xinyuan Mo's picked up his teacup and took a sip. He didn't say anything. Fengjiu propped his chin with one hand and asked, and then? Patriarch Yu stood up and said, Please wait for a moment. Then he turned and walked out. In the courtyard, the two of them looked at each other. Xinyuan Mo said, It's probably something tricky. Fengjiu smiled. That depends on whose hands it is. They could guess that the Yu family had some treasure that had been targeted. Now Yu Qingda probably wanted to hand it over to them. Otherwise, why would he mention this to them? Not long after Yu Qingda returned. He took out a box from his space and opened it. He took out a bronze mirror that was shaped like the 8 trigrams. The bronze mirror was engraved with complicated ancient characters, and there was a picture of the sun and moon on the side. This is it. I don't know who those people are, but I do know that they are here for the Sun-Moon Bagua mirror, which has been passed down in my family for generations. He handed the item to Xinyuan Mo's and said, I have studied this item for a long time, but I could not find any use for it. Because of my family's ancestral teachings, the people of the Yu family are not allowed to use blood to bind this item, so it has always been left like this. Until a few months ago, on the 15th night of the lunar month, the moonlight from the starry sky shone into my home and resonated with this mirror. From then on, something happened to the people in my residence. Master Ling, Madam Ling, I know it's a little immoral to give this troublesome thing to you, but our Yu family really can't keep this thing, and because we don't know what it can be used for, we don't dare to let it fall into the wrong hands, so Xinyuan Mo studied the Sun-Moon Bagua mirror for a while before handing it to Fengjiu. Take a look. Fengjiu took it and looked at it. Other than the complicated ancient characters engraved on it, there was only the picture of the sun and moon. It looked inconspicuous and he really didn't know what it could be used for. This is an item passed down in your family, but you don't know what it can be used for? Fengjiu raised his eyebrows and looked at him, feeling that it was a little strange. It is indeed good. Not only do I not know, but even my father doesn't know because this is something my grandfather left behind. No one knows where it came from, but it has always been hung in the residence as a mirror to ward off evil spirits. Yu Qingda said. Hearing this, Fengjiu was slightly surprised. He took the item and looked at it, saying, Are you sure you want to give this to us? This is an item passed down in your family. Chapter 35-31. Fengjiu glanced at the 8 trigrams mirror in her hand. Her eyes flickered. She felt her palm heating up as she held the 8 trigrams mirror in her hand. She said, All right, I'll keep this. You just need to spread the news and let those people know that this mirror is in my hands. Yu Qingda stood up and cupped his hands at them. Thank you, Master Ling, Madam Ling. He thought that with their strength they shouldn't be afraid of those people. Then I'll go back first. You two should rest early. He turned around and left as he spoke. After he left, Fengjiu held the Sun-Moon 8 trigrams mirror and said to Xinyuan Mo's, This mirror is a little strange. My palm feels a little hot when I hold it. Xinyuan Mo said, Then try dripping your blood on it to make it recognize you as its master. See if it's a magic tool. Okay. She nodded and squeezed out a drop of blood from her fingertip. However, when she saw that the drop of blood didn't seep into the 8 trigrams mirror, she couldn't help but be slightly surprised. This thing shouldn't be a magic tool, right? Why can't I drip my blood on it and make it recognize me as its master? Xinyuan Mo took it and looked at it. Indeed, the blood did not seep into it. He studied it for a while and did not find anything special about the 8 trigrams mirror. He said, Then keep it for now. We'll slowly study it in the future. Okay. She put the 8 trigrams mirror into her space as she spoke. She looked at the sky and said, "Let's rest here tonight. We'll leave at dawn tomorrow." After making the decision, the two of them returned to their rooms to rest. Meanwhile, outside the residence, the crowd gradually dispersed because Elder Yang rushed over to chase them away. Elder Yang felt apologetic that his words during the day had attracted those people. He entered the U residence. He originally wanted to go to the woman's place, but after some thought he did not. He went to the main hall and saw Patriarch Yu. "Does Madame Ling know about the commotion outside?" Elder Yang asked with an uneasy expression. "She knows." Patriarch Yu replied with a smile. The Elder Yang wanted to say something, but he did not know what to say. Seeing this, Patriarch Yu smiled and said, "Elder Yang, there's no need to worry. The people outside didn't cause any trouble for Madame Ling. She didn't pay attention to them and went to bed early." Hearing this, Elder Yang let out a sigh of relief. "That's good." He stood up and said, "If that's the case, then I'll take my leave. I'll come back tomorrow morning to look for Madame Ling." Then, without waiting for Patriarch Yu to say anything, he turned around and walked out. Yu Zhejiang opened his mouth, but in the end he didn't say anything. He just sighed softly, watched him leave, and then turned to go inside. The next morning, when the sky was still dark, Xianyuan Mose and Fengjiu left quietly. They did not even alert the people in the Yu residence. Because Patriarch Yu knew that they were leaving, he came over early in the morning to see if they had woken up. He wanted to invite them to have breakfast before leaving, but he didn't expect that when he arrived at the courtyard, they were already gone. When Elder Yang arrived at the Yu residence, it was already the end of the morning. The moment he entered the main hall of the Yu residence, he asked, "Why did I hear rumors outside that Madame Ling has left? You even gave your family's heirloom to her?" Patriarch Yu was drinking tea in the main seat and discussing some matters with a few people in the residence. When he heard this, he had the people in the residence leave first. He stood up and greeted Elder Yang with a smile. "Elder Yang, good morning. Please sit." Chapter 35-32. Patriarch Yu smiled and walked forward. "Yes, they left. I only found out they left when I went over this morning." Elder Yang frowned and fell silent. After a long while he asked, "Did they say where they were going? Or when they will be back?" This Patriarch Yu paused and smiled. "They didn't say. Rumor has it that you gave that thing to them? Is that true?" Elder Yang narrowed his eyes and asked. "That's right." Patriarch Yu nodded. "I gave it to them last night. After all, that thing will only bring trouble to our Yu family. However, it's in the hands of Master Ling and Madame Ling. It won't be easy for ordinary people to take it. So, after getting Madame Ling's permission, I gave it to her." Elder Yang fell silent for a while and said, "If they come in the future, remember to inform me." Then he left a communication jade token to Patriarch Yu. Patriarch Yu was slightly surprised when he received the token from Elder Yang, but he still nodded. "Okay, I understand." On the other side, Xianyuan Mose and Fengjiu were still in the city after leaving the Yu family. However, they weren't with Patriarch Yu in the east of the city. Instead, they were strolling in the west of the city. On the second floor of the restaurant, the two of them were drinking and eating. They watched the people coming and going on the street and the hawkers on both sides of the street shouting. This kind of ordinary and comfortable life was very relaxing. "What do you plan to do if Wang Xuexin meets them?" Fengjiu propped his chin with one hand and asked Xianyuan Mose. "Cripple her," Xianyuan Mose said calmly. He spun the wine cup in his hand and a cold light flashed in his eyes. "She's your junior sister. How can you do that?" Fengjiu looked at him with interest. "It's because of this that I spared her life. Otherwise he would make anyone who touched his reverse scale suffer a fate worse than death." Hearing this, Fengjiu curled his lips and took a sip of wine. He didn't say anything and just looked at the street outside while listening to the discussions of the diners in the restaurant. "Did you hear? The old man of the Yu family woke up. It said that he was poisoned by someone. Elder Yang couldn't find the poison and it was a woman called Madame Ling who saved him. In order to repay her, Patriarch Yu gave his family's heirloom to her." News of this spread early this morning. Not only that, it said that Madame Ling's medical skills are better than Elder Yang's. Since last night and I heard that Madame Ling also left. She probably left from the back door. There are many people watching at the front door. This Madame Ling is quite amazing. She saved the Yu family's old master the moment she made a move. In the past she was unknown, but because of this she was able to suppress Elder Yang. Now her reputation has spread throughout the city. She even obtained the Yu family's heirloom. Did you know? Chapter 35-33. Listening to the discussions in the building, Fengjiu lazily swirled her wine glass and leaned against the window as if she had no bones. She listened to the gossip while enjoying this moment of leisure. Suddenly, she felt someone's gaze fall on her face. She turned around and looked in the direction of that feeling. She saw a man coming up from downstairs, his gaze fixed on her. This person was the man they had shaken off that day. Xianyuan Mose's indifferent black eyes glanced at that person. His brows furrowed imperceptibly. Seeing that he kept staring at Fengjiu, he could not help but feel displeased. A wave of pressure naturally came out of his body and attacked that person. That person stood at the stairs and looked at Fengjiu. Suddenly he felt a strong pressure coming at him. That pressure made him unable to avoid it and his legs went weak. His whole body rolled down the stairs. "Ah!" he cried out in a low voice. His body fell down without any strength. The waiter behind him could not dodge in time and was also knocked down. Only a series of bangs could be heard in the restaurant. Many people looked over and some even laughed out loud. Did this person drink too much? He can't even stand properly when walking down the stairs? How useless, he can even fall down when walking down the stairs. I've never seen such a big person fall down when walking down the stairs. Fengjiu looked at Xianyuan Mose and said with a smile, "Why did you push him down? He didn't do anything to us. Also, it looks like he didn't follow us here. It was just a coincidence." "I don't like him," Xianyuan Mose said indifferently. He took a sip of wine and asked, "Do you want to buy something later? I'll go with you." "That's good too. We'll buy some food and necessities and take a look around," Fengjiu said. The two of them called for the waiter to settle the bill and got up to go downstairs. Downstairs, the man who couldn't catch his breath for a long time still couldn't stand up. His face was pale and his heart was beating in shock. He looked at the two people walking down the stairs hand in hand, and his eyes couldn't help but move slightly. So strong. That man had only used his aura to make him unable to stand. Not to mention at this moment, when his gaze swept over him, a cold aura immediately surged up from the bottom of his feet to the bottom of his heart. Seeing the two of them walk past him and walk out, he paused for a moment, gritted his teeth and followed them. Feeling that the man behind him was following them again, Xianyuan Mose's face darkened. Until Fengjiu patted his hand, the coldness in his eyes did not dissipate. Fengjiu was a little surprised. She thought that the man would not follow them after being forced down the stairs by the coercion. After all, those who were sensible knew that their strength was far above his if they could use coercion to make him unable to stand. Since that was the case, why did he follow them without fear of death? It would be one thing if she didn't disguise herself and still appeared in front of others with her stunning appearance. Perhaps she could even think that the other party had taken a fancy to her appearance. However, she was dressed in green and had an ordinary appearance. Naturally, she couldn't be here for this. Since she wasn't here for this, then what was she here for? Chapter 35-34. The man did not expect her to stop and turn around to ask him a question. He was stunned for a moment. "Why are you following us?" Fengjiu asked again. At this moment, the man regained his senses. He looked at her and his gaze fell on her hand. "You know ancient medicine. Moreover, the Madame Ling that everyone is talking about today should be you, right?" Hearing this, Fengjiu raised her eyebrows. This was not a question but an affirmation. "But ancient medicine?" She looked at the man and asked, "And then?" "I want to ask you to help save someone." The man said this and hurriedly added, "I will pay the reward." "Not interested." Fengjiu smiled. She held Xianyuan Mose's hand and walked forward. It was true that she knew medicine, but she had always saved people based on her mood. She would not save anyone she met. Moreover, she did not even know who the person in front of her was. Why should she help him save someone? The two of them walked forward. The person behind them paused for a moment and followed. However, he did not get too close. After all, the bearded man's aura was very intimidating. However, as he followed behind, he saw that the bearded man, who did not speak much, looked at the woman in green. His gaze was gentle and affectionate. As the two of them walked, because the street was very crowded, he used his body to protect the woman from being bumped into. The woman wanted to eat snacks from the street stalls, so he squeezed forward to buy for her. The woman bought all the things she bought and he helped to put them all into the space. He followed along and saw the man's considerate actions. He could not help but feel strange and confused. That man was obviously a very powerful person. How could a person like him do such a thing for a woman? In the evening, when the sky was dark, Xianyuan Moses Fengjiu returned to the inn to rest. The man also followed her into the inn. In the middle of the night, there was a sudden rumbling sound that shocked almost everyone in the city. Many people put on their clothes and went out to check. What happened? Where did the sound come from? Did something explode? Or did the mountain collapse? Why was the sound so loud? Something happened at the Yu family. The Yu family is on fire. They are surrounded by hundreds of people in black. The various aristocratic families in the city do not dare to interfere. In the room, Xinyuan Mose and Fengjiu heard this and could not help but look at each other. Could it be those people who ambushed them on the road? Now that the item is in our hands, why are they still targeting the Yu family? They probably do not believe that the family heirloom and think it is a scam. Xinyuan Mose B. Let's go take a look, Xinyuan Mose said. He put his hand around her waist and jumped out of the window with her. The man guarding outside seemed to have sensed something. He quickly rushed out of the inn. Seeing the two figures in the night sky, he quickly followed. Chapter 35. Over 100 black-clothed men with sharp swords surrounded the Yu residence. They stood on top of the wall and stared at the Yu family members who were like lambs waiting to be slaughtered. The black-clothed man in the lead stared at Yu Qingda below and narrowed his vicious eyes. Yu Qingda, there is a limit to my patience. Hand over the item if you know what's good for you. Otherwise, so what if I wash your Yu family in blood today? His vicious voice was filled with vicious killing intent, causing the Yu family members to be terrified. The people who were hiding and watching also felt their hearts tremble. How did the Yu family offend such a murderous god? What was the Yu family's heirloom? How could it cause these people to be so aggressive? Yu Qingda clenched his fists tightly and glared at the black-clothed man above. He raised his voice and said, I already said that I gave that item to someone else as a thank you gift. It's not in the hands of my Yu family members. Ah, who would believe your nonsense? The Yin-Yang 8 trigrams mirror is a treasure passed down from your ancestors for 3 generations. How could you give it away so easily? Even if you want a lie, you should find a more believable one. The black-clothed man sneered, obviously not believing his words. Elder Yang, who had rushed over after hearing the news, saw the Yu family surrounded by over 100 black-clothed men. He couldn't help but frown and was about to step out. However, he was stopped by someone after taking a few steps. Elder Yang, what are you planning to do? Bailey Bowen pulled him to a corner. These people are full of killing intent. I'm afraid they will really destroy the Yu family. Although I don't know who these people are, I still have some reputation. I'll go out and say something. Maybe I can help them. As Elder Yang spoke, he broke free from Bailey Bowen's hand and walked out. Elder Yang, Elder Yang. Bailey Bowen shouted, but he saw that the old man didn't listen to him at all. Bailey Bowen couldn't help but shake his head and sigh as he followed him out. This Elder Yang and his Bailey family were old friends. Even if he couldn't save the Yu family members and couldn't care about the Yu family's matters, he could still protect Elder Yang in times of danger. Looks like you won't shed tears without seeing blood. Since you're not going to hand it over, then don't blame me for killing everyone in your Yu residence one by one in front of you. As the black-robed man spoke, he raised his hand. Just as he was about to give the order, he heard an old but vigorous voice. Wait. The black-robed man narrowed his eyes and turned his head. Looking at the old man walking over, he frowned under the mask. Old man, you want to meddle in other people's business? As he spoke, the black-robed man twirled the long sword in his hand, and a cold light flashed through the night. This old man just came out to say a few words. As Elder Yang spoke, he stared at the person without any fear. He continued, My surname is Yang and I'm a publicly acknowledged alchemy saint. I'm ashamed to say that I lost to a young woman yesterday. I truly am a disgrace to the title of alchemy saint. Hearing the old man sighing and feeling ashamed, the black-robed man's killing intent became even stronger. I don't have time to listen to your nonsense. Get lost. If you don't scram, don't blame me for taking your life. Chapter 35-36. As Elder Yang spoke, he looked at the black-robed man and said, Even if you kill them all, they won't be able to take out what you want. Since that's the case, why stain yourself with blood? Moreover, anyone with a discerning eye can see that no one in the Yu family is a match for you. Don't you think it's beneath your dignity to kill some people who aren't a match for you? Hearing Elder Yang's words, the corner of Bailey Bowen's mouth twitched. What was Elder Yang thinking by talking about his identity to these murderers? I agree with that. A casual voice sounded, causing everyone to be startled, especially the Yu family members Elder Yang and Bailey Bowen who had heard this voice. They were even more astonished. Didn't they already leave? Why were they still here? After the pleasant surprise, Patriarchy was deeply worried. There were over 100 people here, and the strength of these people was obviously different from the people who ambushed them on the way here. Just the 12 people beside the black-robed man, each of them had unfathomable strength. With so many people, would Master Ling and Madam Ling have a chance of winning? Elder Yang looked towards the direction of the voice and saw two figures standing on a roof not far away. They were very clear under the night sky. The woman was dressed in cyan clothes. She had an ordinary face and a lazy temperament. With a single glance, one could see her existence. Behind her was a man in black clothes. The man had a large beard and his face could not be seen clearly. The only thing that could be seen was that his aura was very cold. Madam Ling, didn't you leave? Why did you come back? Elder Yang was also very surprised when he saw her. There were over 100 people here waiting for her to take the family heirloom, but she actually came back? Shouldn't a normal person leave after hearing the news? Why was this person so different from normal people? The black-robed man stared at the two people who suddenly appeared. With just a glance, he narrowed his eyes and asked, Madam Ling? The woman that Yu Qingda spoke of? Fengjiu didn't even look at the black-robed man. He just smiled at Elder Yang and said, We were originally strolling around the western part of the city and planned to leave tomorrow. I didn't expect that someone would come to the Yu family to ask for the treasure that is already in my hands. As she spoke, she flipped her palm, and an 8 trigrams mirror appeared in her hand. She tossed it into the air, and the 8 trigrams mirror returned to her hand. Are you looking for this thing? At this moment, the Yu clan's patriarch's breath was stuck in his throat. Was Madam Ling tired of living? He actually took out the mirror and played with it in front of them. He was simply courting death. The black-robed man stared at the 8 trigrams mirror in her hand. The sun, moon, and the shape of the 8 trigrams mirror were very clear in the night. With just a glance, he knew that it was the 8 trigrams mirror he was looking for. He glanced at Yu Qingda and snorted coldly. I didn't expect that you would be willing to give such a treasure to a woman of unknown origin. As he spoke, he waved his hand, and the black-robed men surrounding the Yu clan instantly changed directions. With a flash, they had already surrounded the two people standing on the roof not far away. Chapter 35-37. You're talking about those fleas that popped out a while ago? Fengjiu looked at the 8 trigrams mirror. He really didn't know what this thing was for. Fleas? Not only did the black-robed man emit killing intent, but the hundreds of black-robed men also clenched their swords tightly. Their eyes were filled with bloodthirsty killing intent and cold anger as they stared at the green-robed woman. She actually dared to call them fleas? She really didn't know the meaning of death. Sword chi shot out from the blades of their swords. The crowd below couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air as they observed a moment of silence for the two. Of all the people she could have provoked? Why did she have to provoke these fiends? This time, even if she didn't die, she would lose a layer of skin. Looking at the incoming sword chi, Fengjiu smiled and said to Shenyuan Mo's, Husband, since we're leaving tomorrow, why don't we do something big tonight? Do something big? When everyone heard this, they couldn't help but feel speechless. Especially Elder Yang and Housemaster Bailey, the corners of their mouths twitched. Those who didn't know would think that the two of them came from a bandit's nest. Shenyuan Mo's looked at her dotingly and replied, Okay. As soon as his voice fell, his figure had already swept out. With a turn of his body, a powerful aura swept out, and those black-clothed men who were holding swords and wanted to kill people, fell down one by one before they could even draw their swords. The thick smell of blood permeated the air. In the darkness of the night, those black-clothed men fell down without any strength to fight back. The powerful pressure and the overwhelming killing intent made the hearts of the surrounding people tremble violently. Housemaster Bailey was shocked. Almost instinctively, he pulled Elder Yang and quickly retreated 100 meters away. The killing intent and aura emitted from the bearded man was too terrifying. He almost couldn't breathe at that moment. Moreover, this was under the circumstance that the aura and killing intent weren't directed at him. He really didn't dare to imagine what kind of death aura it would be if the aura and killing intent were directed at him. When he thought of this, he felt his hair stand on end. A chill ran up from the bottom of his feet to his heart. Shock and fear that he hadn't felt in a long time filled his heart, to the point that he didn't even dare to breathe loudly. To catch bandits, first catch the ringleader. I want to take down the big one. Fengjiu's voice carried a trace of excitement. She turned her hand and put away the bagua mirror. With a tap of her foot, she held a dagger in a reverse grip and attacked the masked black-robed man with a speed that was too fast for one to cover their ears. The black-robed man watched in horror as the bearded man in black robes killed dozens of his subordinates in one move. Seeing the overwhelming killing intent rolling towards him, the black-robed man was shocked. Before he could react, he felt a chill coming towards him. Instinctively, he quickly dodged, but unexpectedly, his shoulder was still ruthlessly slashed by a knife. Swish. Hiss. He sucked in a breath of cold air and looked at the green-clothed woman. She was holding a dagger in a reverse grip, and there was a smile on her ordinary face. Her slightly curled lips revealed a hint of mockery and strangeness, causing his heart to turn cold. Chapter 35-38. Why didn't you dodge? Aren't you quite good at shouting? Fengjiu toyed with the dagger in his hand. He looked at the deep wound on the man's shoulder and curled his lips into a smile. Down below, Hallmaster Bailey narrowed his eyes. He had thought that Madame Ling was only skilled in medicine. He did not expect her speed to be so incredible as well. Even he could not see the direction of her attack at that speed. The wound stung and the night wind blew, chilling him to the bone. The black-robed man stared at the green-robed woman in front of him and asked in a gloomy voice, "Who are you people? Since when was there such a strong cultivator in this place?" He didn't even know how strong this person was. "What does it matter who I am? The thing you want is in my hands, isn't it? Didn't you say that you wanted to kill me? I'm waiting for you to try and see if you have the ability to hurt me." As Fengjiu spoke, his figure moved and the green-robed figure swept out again. The sharp dagger slashed through the night sky and flashed with a cold light. Ah! Another blood-curdling scream was heard. This scream caused the hearts of the black-robed men who were still alive in Xinyuan Mo's hands to tremble. They looked in the direction of the sound and felt a chill on their necks. In the next moment their eyes widened and they fell to the ground. Xinyuan Mo glanced at the bodies on the ground in disgust. His deep black eyes looked at the remaining 12 black-robed men. These 12 people were more powerful than the rest. Hence, when he had taken the lives of the black-robed men, they had nimbly avoided the disaster. However, none of them would be able to leave this place alive tonight. When the 12 men saw that the bearded man had his eyes on them, they could not help but shiver. They immediately retreated towards their master. However, as soon as they turned around, the bearded man caught up to them. "Master, let's go." One of them shouted, not daring to continue fighting. Because this wasn't a battle between the two sides at all. Instead, one side was reaping lives like an Azura. The masked man's shoulder was pierced by Fengjiu, and he felt all the strength in his body disappear. He couldn't help but fall to the ground from mid-air. At the same time, he saw the woman in green falling from mid-air. He couldn't help but grit his teeth, and with a flick of his sleeve, a teleportation scroll appeared in his palm. Before he could open it, the hand holding the teleportation scroll was kicked. Hiss. The hand that was kicked pulled at the wound on his arm, and the pain caused his breath to dissipate. However, before he could stand up, a kick came at his face and the mask on his face was kicked away. His whole body also fell to the ground in a sorry state. Clang. The mask fell to the ground, revealing his face hidden behind it. Fengjiu took a look and saw that the man's face was completely destroyed, as if he had been burned by fire. It was very hideous. She glanced at him and then looked away. Her eyes met his. "Speak. What's the secret behind this 8 trigrams mirror?" With a flick of her hand, the 8 trigrams mirror appeared in her hand again. Chapter 35-39. Fengjiu looked at him quietly, a faint light flashing across her cold eyes. Her languid voice rang out unhurriedly, "You're not going to speak? That's fine, I have many ways to make you speak. It just depends on whether you can take it or not." With that, she slashed the blade in her hand, and another bloody wound appeared on his body. She looked at him and said, "You can think about it slowly but don't think about escaping. Once you've fallen into my hands, you won't be able to escape." Another gust of wind flashed past, and this time the tendons in his left leg were severed. The black-robed man gritted his teeth and groaned. He clenched his fists tightly, and a pair of bloodthirsty and ruthless eyes stared at Fengjiu like a wolf. Fengjiu curled her lips, raised the dagger in her hand and slashed again. She said slowly, "I believe that a person like you will not commit suicide. Since you can't escape, if you want to die more comfortably, you can only obediently tell me what I want to know." 100 meters away, Elder Yang and House Master Bailey watched as she slashed the man's body again and again without batting an eyelid. They could not help but feel a chill in their hearts. Although they knew that the man was also an evil person whose hands were stained with blood, seeing a woman like this really made them shiver. On the other side, after Xinyuan Mose had dealt with the 12 people, he looked at the scattered corpses and said to Yu Qingda, "Get someone to collect the things on the ground." Yu Qingda knew what he meant, so he called 2 middle-aged men forward and got them to collect the valuables on the corpses and hand them over to Xinyuan Mose. Under his gaze, no one dared to covet those things. After all, this Master Ling was too powerful, and they respected him from the bottom of their hearts. Naturally, they did not dare to have any thoughts about him. Xinyuan Mose swept his eyes over the corpses with his hands behind his back. For someone of his strength, these people were like ants in front of him. He could kill them with a light touch, and it would not take much effort to kill them. "Master Ling, this was found on the bodies of the black-robed men. Please take a look." Yu Qingda took the item and walked forward, handing it to him with both hands. Xinyuan Mose glanced at it, then took the interspatial ring. He scanned the inside of the interspatial ring with his divine sense, then stored the ring in his interspatial ring. At the same time, he instructed Qingda, "Take care of the corpse on the ground." "Yes, yes." Yu Qingda replied, and hurriedly asked the people in the residence to clean up. He walked over to Feng Jiu and saw that the person on the ground was already on the verge of death. Xinyuan Mose walked over to Feng Jiu's side, raised his hand and formed a soundproof barrier. "Almost," Xinyuan Mose said. "Yes, I think it's about time." Feng Jiu nodded. She stepped forward and stepped on the man. The man on the ground opened his mouth and screamed. At the same time, she flicked a pill into his throat. "This is the loot." Xinyuan Mose handed the space ring to her. Feng Jiu smiled and kept it, saying, "Later we'll find someone to pawn it. Pawn all of these things." Okay. The two of them talked for a while, then Feng Jiu looked at the man on the ground and asked softly, "What's the use of the 8 trigrams mirror? What are you going to do with it?" Chapter 35-40. Seeing this, Feng Jiu was a little surprised. This person's willpower was quite strong. She watched as blood flowed out from his mouth until his body finally stopped moving. Before he could even take a breath, he died. She couldn't help but sigh softly. What a stubborn person. This world was so cruel. The opponents he met today were above him in terms of strength. If the two of them did not appear, the Yu family would be the ones to be bathed in blood tonight. Seeing that the person had severed his own meridians and died, Xinyuan Mose calmly retracted his gaze and looked at the people around him. Feng Jiu took all the things on the other person's body, then said to Xinyuan Mose, "Let's go." With that, she raised her hand to disperse the soundproof barrier. Holding Xinyuan Mose's hand, she raised her chi and headed into the night. "Wait." Elder Yang recovered his senses and hurriedly shouted. However, he saw the two figures quickly disappear into the night. No one knew where they went. Yu Qingda looked in the direction they left in, his heart filled with gratitude. He ordered people to clean up the scene, then cupped his hands in salute to Elder Yang and turned to enter the residence. "Tomorrow morning, get someone to repair the main gate." Yu Qingda instructed and walked inside to his father's courtyard. However, to his surprise, when he arrived at his father's courtyard, he saw the two people who had already left sitting in the courtyard and drinking tea. "Ling, Master Ling, Madam Ling, why are you?" He thought they had left but did not expect them to come back. "We want to talk to your father," Feng Jiu said. At first, they thought it was something like a Dharma artifact. However, seeing that the person was unwilling to give up until his death, it was obviously not that simple. Now that the person was dead, and they had no clue about the 8 trigrams mirror, they could only see if there were any useful clues from Elder Yu's mouth. Hearing their words, Yu Qingda understood what they meant, so he nodded. "All right. However, although my father is awake, his body has been weak for a long time. After waking up, he has been sleeping most of the time. Why don't the two of you rest here tonight and ask my father tomorrow morning? Otherwise, I'm worried that his body won't be able to take it. After all what happened tonight." Seeing this, Xinyuan Mose said, "Tomorrow then. However, the reason we came back here after leaving is because we don't want to be disturbed." Yes, I know. I'll pass it on," he said hurriedly. Thus, the two of them stayed here for another night while the members of the Yu clan were busy. After all, the incident tonight had destroyed half of the Yu clan's main gate, so it was impossible for the people in the residence to rest. And at the back door of the Yu clan, there was a figure standing guard. When the Yu clan's guards discovered this, they reported it to the Yu clan head. The Yu clan head didn't have time to rest and went to the back door to take a look. "Who are you? What are you doing here?" Yu Qingda looked at the man and asked. I'm waiting for Madame Ling and the others, the man said. Hearing this, Yu Qingda was slightly startled and sized him up. They've already left. Why are you still guarding here? I saw them go in, the man said. Hearing this, Yu Qingda smiled and didn't say anything else. He just turned around and walked inside. Seeing this, the man hesitated, then said, "You clan head, please wait. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure."